Welcome to our channel where we share insights from the Bible. Today, we're diving into one of the most intriguing and debated stories from the Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. What were the sins that led to their downfall? Let's explore the 5 sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, why God destroyed it. Sodom and Gomorrah, two ancient cities mentioned in the book of Genesis, have long been synonymous with sin and divine judgment. These cities were known for their wealth and prosperity, but they were also infamous for their wickedness. According to the Bible, their sins were so great that God decided to destroy them. But what exactly were these sins? Let's delve into the biblical narrative and explore the various interpretations of the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is primarily found in Genesis 18-19. The narrative begins with God informing Abraham that he plans to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is very grievous, Genesis 18:20. Abraham pleads with God to spare the cities if even 10 righteous people can be found there. However, the city's fate is sealed when 2 angels, disguised as men, visit Sodom and are met with hostility and violence. One of the most commonly cited sins of Sodom and Gomorrah is sexual immorality, particularly homosexuality. In Genesis 19:4-5, the men of Sodom surround Lot's house and demand that he bring out his guests so they can know them, a biblical euphemism for sexual relations. This incident has led many to conclude that homosexuality was a primary reason for the city's destruction. Another interpretation focuses on the lack of hospitality shown by the inhabitants of Sodom. In ancient Near Eastern culture, hospitality was a highly valued virtue. The hostile reception of the angels by the men of Sodom, who sought to harm them, is seen as a grave violation of this cultural norm. This perspective is supported by passages like Ezekiel 16:49, which states that Sodom's sins included pride, excessive food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. Ezekiel 16:49-50 provides another angle, listing pride, gluttony, and neglect of the poor as the sins of Sodom. This interpretation suggests that the cities were destroyed not just for sexual immorality but for a broader range of social injustices. The people of Sodom were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned about the plight of the less fortunate. Some scholars argue that the primary sin of Sodom was violence and oppression. The attempted gang rape of the angels is seen as an act of extreme violence and a demonstration of the city's moral decay. This interpretation aligns with the broader biblical theme of God condemning violence and oppression. Like, share, comment and subscribe for more videos like this. The New Testament also references Sodom and Gomorrah, often using them as examples of divine judgment. In Matthew 10:15, Jesus says that it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for towns that reject his disciples. This comparison suggests that the rejection of God's message is a sin comparable to those committed by Sodom and Gomorrah. First, let's talk about pride. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah were known for their excessive pride. They believed they were above others and even above God's laws. This arrogance blinded them to their own faults and led them to look down on everyone else. Pride and arrogance. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah were described as being haughty and self-centered. They believed they were invincible and above reproach. This arrogance led them to ignore the needs of others and to live in a way that was completely self-serving. Pride can be a dangerous thing. It can make us feel invincible and untouchable, but in reality, it often leads to our downfall. Next, we have greed. The inhabitants of these cities prioritized wealth and material possessions over compassion and justice. Their desire for more led them to exploit others and ignore the needs of the less fortunate. Greed can consume us, making us forget the importance of kindness and generosity. It's a reminder that wealth isn't everything. Lust was another significant factor in the downfall of Sodom and Gomorrah. The cities were known for their rampant sexual immorality. This unchecked desire led to a society that was morally corrupt and far from the values they should have upheld. The 4th sin is the lack of hospitality. In ancient times, hospitality was a crucial virtue. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah were notorious for their inhospitable behavior, especially toward strangers. This is evident in the way they treated the angels who visited Lot. Instead of welcoming them, they sought to harm them. Inhospitality was another major sin of these cities. They lacked kindness and hospitality towards strangers and the needy. This lack of compassion further highlighted their moral decay. The 5th sin is idolatry and turning away from God. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah had abandoned their faith and were worshipping false gods. They had turned their backs on the teachings and commandments of the Lord, choosing instead to follow their desires and impulses. The sin of idolatry and turning away from God is a significant aspect of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This sin is often seen as a root cause of the other transgressions committed by the inhabitants of these cities. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah had abandoned their faith in the one true God. Instead of following the teachings and commandments of the Lord, they chose to worship false gods and idols. This abandonment of faith is a recurring theme in the Bible, where turning away from God often leads to moral and social decay. Idolatry, the worship of false gods, was a common practice in the ancient Near East. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah likely engaged in various forms of idol worship, which included rituals and practices that were abhorrent to the God of Israel. This worship of false gods was seen as a direct rejection of God's sovereignty and a violation of the first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," Exodus 23. By turning away from God, the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah allowed their desires and impulses to dictate their actions. This led to a society characterized by moral corruption, where people pursued their own selfish interests without regard for divine commandments or the well-being of others. The Bible often portrays idolatry as leading to a host of other sins, including sexual immorality, violence, and social injustice. The theme of idolatry and turning away from God is not unique to Sodom and Gomorrah. Throughout the Bible, there are numerous instances where the Israelites are warned against idolatry and the consequences of abandoning their faith. For example, in Deuteronomy 29:18-20, Moses warns the Israelites that turning to other gods will lead to disaster and destruction. The most well-known sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is sexual immorality. The Bible describes the inhabitants as engaging in various forms of sexual misconduct, including homosexuality and other acts considered abominable by biblical standards. In Genesis 19, the Bible provides a vivid account of the sexual immorality in Sodom. Two angels, disguised as men, visit Lot in Sodom. Lot, recognizing them as divine messengers, offers them hospitality and shelter. However, the men of Sodom surround Lot's house and demand that he bring out his guests so they can know them, Genesis 19:5. This phrase is widely interpreted as a desire to engage in sexual relations with the visitors, highlighting the inhabitants' depravity. The attempted assault on the angels is often cited as evidence of the prevalence of homosexuality in Sodom. This incident has led many to conclude that homosexuality was a primary reason for the city's destruction. The Bible explicitly condemns such acts, and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is frequently referenced in discussions about biblical views on homosexuality. While the attempted assault on the angels is the most explicit example, the Bible suggests that the sexual immorality in Sodom and Gomorrah was not limited to homosexuality. The inhabitants are described as engaging in various forms of sexual misconduct, including adultery, fornication, and other acts considered abominable by biblical standards. This widespread immorality contributed to the city's reputation for wickedness. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is often interpreted as a divine judgment against sexual immorality. The fire and brimstone that rained down on the cities are seen as a direct response to their sinful behavior. This interpretation underscores the seriousness with which the Bible views sexual misconduct and serves as a warning against such behavior. While sexual immorality is a significant aspect of the story, it is important to consider it within the broader context of the city's sins. The Bible also highlights other transgressions, such as pride, lack of hospitality, and social injustice. These sins collectively contributed to the moral decay of Sodom and Gomorrah and their ultimate destruction. In modern interpretations, idolatry can be understood more broadly as anything that takes the place of God in a person's life. This could include the pursuit of wealth, power, or pleasure at the expense of spiritual and moral values. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah continues to be relevant today, reminding us of the dangers of turning away from God and the importance of maintaining our faith and integrity. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of idolatry and turning away from God. The destruction of these cities by fire and brimstone is depicted as a divine judgment against their wickedness. This judgment underscores the seriousness with which God views idolatry and the importance of remaining faithful to Him. The city of Sodom and Gomorrah has been the subject of much debate and interpretation over the centuries. Different religious traditions and scholars have emphasized various aspects of the city's sins. Some conservative interpretations focus primarily on sexual immorality, while more liberal interpretations may emphasize social injustice and lack of hospitality. Sodom and Gomorrah continues to be relevant today, serving as a cautionary tale about the consequences of moral and spiritual decay. It reminds us of the importance of adhering to ethical and moral standards and the potential consequences of turning away from them. The sin of sexual immorality is a central theme in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The attempted assault on the angels in Genesis 19 highlights the extent of the inhabitants' depravity and serves as a key reason for the city's destruction. However, it is important to consider this sin within the broader context of the city's moral and social failings. The story remains a powerful reminder of the importance of righteousness and the dangers of moral corruption. Sodom and Gomorrah serve as a powerful reminder of the consequences of living a life of sin. It also highlights the importance of righteousness, justice, and compassion. While the destruction of these cities is a sobering tale, it also offers lessons on the values that are essential for a just and moral society. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more biblical stories and lessons. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.